Welcome to the channel. I'm so glad you're here. Before we begin tonight's journey into the slow rhythm of water and moonlight, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Is it that still hour just after midnight when everything softens and the world feels far away? Or are you somewhere in the early hours of dawn when the sky is still holding its breath before the light arrives? Wherever you are, you don't need to do anything right now. No decisions, no expectations. Just let your body melt a little more into where you are. Let the quiet settle in and begin to breathe with you, because tonight we're going on a journey that flows between gravity and dreams, science and storyware, following something ancient, older than civilization, older than memory, the tide, the sea, and the soft, invisible pull of the moon. It's one of those truths that's so constant it almost disappears. But if you live by the ocean, if you've ever walked a shoreline at different times of day, you'll notice that the sea is never in quite the same place. Sometimes it creeps up the sand and tickles the rocks. Sometimes it pulls back and reveals tide pools and shells and forgotten driftwood, and all of it, all this rising and falling, this coming and going, is because of something hanging in the sky far above. The moon doesn't command it, doesn't shout it, doesn't even shine by its own light, but still it moves the sea. Long before we had telescopes or equations or any understanding of the universe, people knew that something about the moon mattered. They watched the way water rose and fell. They noticed how the biggest tides came with the full moon, and they saw patterns, not random, but rhythmic, almost as if the moon was breathing through the ocean. And so, to many ancient cultures, the moon became more than just a light in the night sky. It became a goddess, a clock, a force of magic that whispered in waves and marked the passing of time in silver arcs across the heavens. But, of course, now we know more. Now we can trace those tides not to spells, but to gravity, that quiet force that connects everything with mass: you, me, the earth, the moon, and even the water beneath our feet. Gravity is what pulls the apple down, what keeps the planets spinning in their orbits, and it's what allows the moon, with its gentle presence, to pull on the earth and stretch the ocean outward. Imagine the earth floating in space, wrapped in a skin of blue water. Now imagine the moon, about 384,000 kilometers away, softly tugging on that water. It pulls a bulge of the ocean toward it, not with violence or urgency, but with steady, patient gravity. But here's the strange and beautiful part: there's another bulge of water on the opposite side of the planet, too. That happens because the moon is pulling slightly harder on the Earth's surface than on the far side of the ocean. So the water stretches away in both directions, one bulge facing the moon, the other trailing behind. As the Earth spins beneath those bulges, we pass through them. That's why, in most coastal places, there are 2 high tides and 2 low tides each day. A slow, steady heartbeat of the ocean, rising and falling, always returning, always moving on. It's a rhythm that has shaped the world for billions of years. The tide rolls in, bringing nutrients to shorelines, stirring plankton and life. Then it rolls out, revealing sandbanks and exposing rocky secrets that only exist between the ocean's breaths. Without tides, the ocean would be quieter, yes, but also emptier. If the constant stirring that brings richness, the coming and going that breathes life into places that would otherwise stay still. And yet, it's not just the moon that pulls. The sun, massive and distant, also tugs on the ocean. Its gravity matters too, but because it's much farther away than the moon, its effect on tides is only about half as strong. But when the moon and the sun align, during full moons and new moons, their gravity works together, and that's when we get the biggest tides. Of all these, are called spring tides, not because of the season, but because of the springing motion of the water. The highs are higher, the lows are lower, the pull is stronger, the cycle more pronounced, and when the moon is at a right angle to the sun. During the first and third quarter phases, their gravitational pulls interfere with one another. They push in different directions, and the result is gentler, less extreme tides. These are called neap tides, tides that barely whisper as they shift. So even the phases of the moon are written into the waves, and if you watch the ocean long enough, you'll see it responding, not just daily, but monthly, rising and falling with the moon's changing face. This rhythm has been with us since the beginning, even before life crawled out of the ocean. The tides were moving, washing over coastlines, pulling minerals into the sea, stirring the first ingredients of life, and it all began long ago, with an enormous cosmic impact, billions of years ago. When the Earth was young, it collided with a planet-sized object called Thiath. Impact was cataclysmic, and from the debris of that collision, the moon was born. Molten rock was flung into orbit. It cooled. It collected. It became our companion, not created beside Earth, but born from Earth itself. And because the moon formed so close, the early tides were wild. The moon's gravity, stronger than because of its proximity, pulled on the ocean in enormous waves. Tides may have risen hundreds of feet, crashing into shorelines, shaping continents, roaring, crashing world, sculpted by the moon's embrace. Since then, the moon has been drifting slowly away, about 3.8 centimeters farther, every Yara quiet retreat that continues even now. The farther it goes, the gentler the tides become, and yet, even at this great distance, even with all the space between, it still pulls. Every tide that rises is a sign that the connection has not been broken. Every wave that returns is a quiet answer to the moon's ancient collets. Easy to take it for granted to stand by the sea and see only water, to forget that it's moving to the rhythm of something greater, to forget that the tide is a message written in waves, carried across time, across space. The moon does not speak, and yet it is always heard, and in some strange way. Perhaps that is why we feel so drawn to it, why people stare at the moon and feel a longing they can't explain, because just as it pulls the sea, maybe it pulls at us too, not in body, but in mind, not in motion, but in memory. A quiet pull, unseen, but undeniable. So as you listen now, and your thoughts begin to slow, as the tide of your own mind begins to settle, remember that you are part of this story. Too, you are mostly water. You live on a world wrapped in ocean, and somewhere above, the moon is still watching, still pulling, still holding the sea in its orbit, still holding you. In the previous part, we learned how the moon's gravity creates the rising and falling of tides across the world. Now we follow that motion as it reaches the edge of the sea, to the places where water touches land and sculpts it over time. The tide is more than just a cycle. It is a powerful and patient force that slowly shapes the world around us. Every coastline on Earth has been formed in part by the steady breath of the tides. The water flows in, moves the sand, wears away at cliffs, and slowly smooths jagged edges into curves. It reaches into the land, and then gently retreats, pulling tiny pieces of stone and shell back into the sea. Over the years, over the centuries, the shore changes shape in ways we can barely see, but the moon's silent work continues without pause. In some places, the effects of tides are more dramatic than others. One such place is the Bay of Fundy, located between Canada and the northeastern United States. There, the difference between low tide and high tide can be more than 50 feet. When the tide is low, the ocean seems to vanish, leaving boats sitting on soft mud. When the tide returns, those same boats rise once more as the water flows back. In the unique shape of the bay allows the water to build up in an amplified motion, creating some of the highest tides on Earth. It is as if the sea itself is taking a deep breath and then exhaling in a long and measured rhythm. In other parts of the world, the moon creates even stranger effects. In some rivers, like the Amazon and the Qiantang River in China, a tidal event, called a tidal bore, can occur. Instead of water flowing calmly downstream, a strong tide from the ocean rushes inward, forming a wave that travels up the river. The water seems to reverse direction, flowing upstream with surprising strength. It is rare and powerful, and once again it is caused by the quiet but persistent pull of the moon. But the tide does not only shape land or create waves, it also supports life. At the places where rivers meet the ocean, known as estuaries, the tide creates a unique environment. Fresh water mixes with salt water, and the land breathes in a rhythm set by the sea. These wetlands are full of life. Fish lay eggs there. Birds feed along the edges. Tiny plants and grasses sway with every change in the water. The tide feeds these places and keeps them alive. Many animals live according to the tide's schedule. Some species of crab only lay their eggs at the highest tide so that the eggs are carried safely out to sea. Shorebirds search for food when the tide is low and the sand is exposed. Mussels and oysters open and close in rhythm with the sea, knowing when they will be underwater and when they will be in the air. Even deep in the ocean, tiny plankton drift upward at night and sink again during the day, following a rhythm that often aligns with the moon. Coral reefs, which seem so still, are also shaped by the moon at certain times of the year. During specific phases of the moon, corals release clouds of eggs and sperm into the water in a massive, synchronized event. These moments are not controlled by clocks or temperature. They are guided by the moon above and the ancient patterns it has taught the sea. Tides have existed longer than forests, longer than birds, longer than anything that now lives on land. When the earth was still young, the moon was closer than it is today, and its pull on the ocean was stronger. The tides back then were much more extreme. They might have risen hundreds of feet, crashing into the early shorelines and shaping the chemistry of the first oceans. Over time, the moon has drifted slowly away from the earth, and the tides have grown gentler, but they still move, still breathe, still shape the world. Humans have watched the moon for thousands of years and have given it meaning. The moon became more than just a light in the sky. It became a way to measure time, a symbol of change, and a part of daily life. Farmers planted seeds according to its phases. Fishermen timed their work with the tides. Sailors watched the moon to understand the sea. The moon's 28-day cycle became the basis for many early calendars. Even the human body follows similar rhythms, with cycles that seem to echo the moon in both length and mood. In many ancient cultures, the moon was seen as a goddess or a spirit. The Babylonians studied it with great care. The Greeks gave it names like Selene and Artemis. The Maori of New Zealand created a lunar calendar that helped them know when to plant, when to fish, and when to rest. In many places, the moon was seen as a quiet guide, connected to the body, the earth, and the soul. Modern science has begun to explore whether the moon still affects us today. Some research suggests that sleep can change with the phases of the moon. People may sleep less deeply during the full moon, even when there is no light in the room. Other studies have looked at possible connections between the moon and hormone levels, mood, or body temperature. The science is not always clear, but the question remains: if the moon can move entire oceans, might it also move something within us? Our bodies are mostly water. Our hearts beat in waves. Our breath flows in and out like the tide. We are not separate from the ocean. We are part of it. We carry the sea inside us. And perhaps that is why so many people feel something when they see the moon. A quiet pull, a moment of stillness, a feeling they cannot explain. The tide is not just a rise and fall of water. It is the result of a relationship, a connection between the moon and the earth, between gravity and motion, between silence and rhythm. It is an ancient message written in the sea, and even now it continues to speak. So as you listen now, as your body rests and your thoughts begin to soften, remember that you are moving with the tide too. You are part of the rhythm. The moon is still there, pulling gently, and the sea will rise again as it always does, slowly, quietly, patiently. You may remember that the moon was once much closer to the earth than it is now. In the earliest days of the planet, it orbited close by, and the tides it created were wild and extreme. Over the last 4.5 billion years, the moon has been slowly moving farther away, just a few centimeters each year. This change is almost invisible in a single lifetime, but over great stretches of time, it becomes something powerful. And even now, as the moon slips farther into the sky, it continues to shape what happens on Earth in ways that most of us never realize. The tides caused by the moon do not only move water, they also pull at the Earth itself. They create friction between the ocean and the planet's rotation. As the tides rise and fall, the motion of the water slowly acts like a brake on the spinning Earth. This process is called tidal friction. Over time, it causes the rotation of the Earth to slow down just a tiny bit. Our days are growing longer, not by much, just a fraction of a second every century. But it means that millions of years ago, a day was shorter than it is now. The Earth spun faster, the sun rose and set more quickly, and in the distant future, the days will grow even longer still. It may seem strange that the ocean could slow down a planet, but the forces of gravity are patient. The moon pulls, and the water responds. The water moves, and the Earth feels it. Everything is connected. Everything influences something else. And slowly, the system changes. The moon moves farther away. The Earth spins more slowly. The tides become less intense. This process will continue for a long time. Billions of years, in fact. Eventually, if nothing interrupts it, something very unusual will happen. The Earth will become tidally locked to the moon. Right now, the moon is already tidally locked to the Earth. That is why we always see the same face of the moon. One side always faces us, while the other remains hidden, though not forever. It is not truly dark, just unseen from our view. But one day, far in the future, the Earth might also become tidally locked to the moon. If that happens, the same side of the Earth will always face the moon. The moon would stay in the same place in our sky. It would no longer rise and set. It would simply hover in one spot, motionless from our point of view. The other side of the Earth would never see it again. It would remain invisible to half the planet, forever out of reach. In that future, the tides would become smaller. The constant shifting of the sea would quiet down. The tidal energy would reduce. The coastlines would become still. The rhythm we know now, the rise and fall that has marked time for all of human history, would begin to slow and soften. It would not disappear entirely, but it would no longer be the great ocean breath that we live with today. And yet, there is something comforting in this long process. The moon does not change suddenly. It drifts gently. It shifts the world without violence. Its influence is slow and steady, like a whisper that never stops. It reminds us that change does not always need to be loud. that time does not always shout. Sometimes it moves quietly, steadily, calmly, and we follow. The idea of tidal locking may seem distant, but the effect of the moon on time is already with us. Every moment we experience has been touched by the moon's slow pull. Every calendar, every pattern of light and dark, every turn of the sea has been shaped by the gravity of that pale companion in the sky. The moon is part of the reason why Earth is the way it is, why the ocean moves, why the days grow longer, why the night holds a glowing face that watches us in silence, and we are part of that rhythm too. Our own inner sense of time is shaped by nature, by the turning of the earth, by the tilt of the seasons, and yes, perhaps, by the gentle pull of the moon. There is something within us that responds to cycles, not just the ticking of a clock, but the long, quiet turns of the world. The rhythms that stretch beyond the noise of daily life. Even when we are still, we are never truly motionless. The earth is turning, the moon is moving, the sea is breathing, and we are part of that dance, even in sleep. The water in our bodies, the pulse of our hearts, the slow in and out of our breath, all of it echoes the movements of the sea and sky. We are not separate from the tides, we are shaped by them. So as you rest, as you feel your thoughts begin to quiet again, remember that you are lying on a planet that spins through space, surrounded by oceans that rise and fall with the pull of a moon that was once closer and is now slowly drifting away. And in this moment, even as everything moves, you are still and safe and gently held within that motion. There is no need to rush, no need to think too much. Let the moon carry the weight of time. Let the tides roll through you like a slow dream. Let the silence speak. The moon is still watching. The sea is still listening, and you are part of it all. If your eyes are getting heavy and your thoughts feel softer than before, then you are exactly where you should be. We are not rushing through this story. There is no destination. There is only the quiet unfolding of a tale older than memory. In this part of the journey, we drift even deeper into the mystery of the tides. We will explore the hidden reflections of the moon on the surface of the water, and what the ocean reveals when it listens to the sky above. The sea has always been a mirror, not just for light, but for time. On certain nights, when the sky is clear and the moon is full, its light spills over the surface of the ocean in a silver path. That soft reflection is more than just beauty. It is a symbol of a relationship that stretches across space. The moon shines and the ocean answers. It ripples and glows and changes shape to meet the light. For those who have stood near the shore on moonlit nights, the reflection can feel alive. It shifts as the waves rise and fall. It dances when the wind moves the water. Sometimes it becomes a wide glowing road across the sea. Other times it breaks into smaller pieces that sparkle and vanish, as if the moon is whispering stories through light alone. The moon and the ocean are connected not just by gravity, but by rhythm and reflection. One creates motion, the other responds. One lights the night, the other holds that light for a moment before letting it go. This quiet exchange has been happening every night since long before humans ever looked up. But it is not just the surface that changes. Beneath the waves, entire ecosystems respond to the phases of the moon. The light of the full moon penetrates the water more deeply than at other times. In some parts of the sea, that change in light affects feeding patterns. Fish may rise closer to the surface. Plankton may gather in brighter layers. Nocturnal predators adjust their movements, depending on how much light filters down from the moon. Even coral reefs respond to the moon during certain times of the year. Coral species all over the world begin to prepare for a remarkable event. They release eggs and sperm into the water, all at once, in synchronized waves. These mass spawning events are guided by the lunar cycle. Scientists believe that the timing is not random. The moon's light, the tides, and even its gravity might all play a role. In the dark, silent ocean, entire reefs glow with life, each tiny release a sign that the moon is still speaking, and the sea is still listening. There are stories from ancient sailors who navigated by the moon alone, before modern instruments. Seafarers watched the tides and the sky to know when to set sail and when to wait. The moon was both a guide and a warning. A high tide could lift a ship safely into a harbor. A low tide could leave it stuck in sand. The shape and size of the moon gave clues about what the water would do in the hours ahead to those who live close to the sea. The moon is not a distant object, it is part of daily life. Fishermen feel its rhythm. Coastal communities plan by its phases. Even now, in the modern world, tide charts are published based on lunar calculations. Ferries are scheduled. Bridges are designed. Entire cities adjust to the timing of the tides. In this way, the moon lives both in the sky and in the sea. It is a part of Earth's weather, its water, its cycles of food and rest. The moon affects migration patterns, breeding seasons, and the movement of the smallest creatures and the largest waves. And all of it happens in silence. There is no sound to this motion, no voice, no command, only gravity and time. Some cultures speak of the moon as a protector, others as a mystery. Some see it as a symbol of reflection, others see it as a gateway to deeper dreams. But across the world, from one coastline to another, there is a shared understanding that the moon matters, that its light means something, that its movement brings change. The moon does not judge or rush or forget. It moves with steady grace, and the sea remembers. Every grain of sand shaped by tide, every shore redrawn, every salt marsh fed, every bay filled and emptied and filled again. All of it guided by a moon that never stops circling the earth. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that none of this depends on us. It was happening long before we arrived. It will continue long after we are gone. The tides do not need us to believe in them. The moon does not need us to understand. And yet we are included in the rhythm. We are shaped by it. We are held within it. We are made of water that listens to the moon. As you lie still and your thoughts drift like the sea at rest, let this idea sink into you. You do not need to control the tides. You do not need to know the future. You are part of a system that is older and wiser than thought. A system that keeps moving even when you are asleep. Let yourself soften a little more. Let your breath follow the gentle rise and fall of imagined waves. Let your heart slow to the same rhythm. There is nothing you need to hold on to. The tide will carry it. The moon will watch over it, and tomorrow the tide will return, just as it always has, just as it always will. The moon's pull does not end at the shoreline. It moves through more than just the sea. It moves through us. Our bodies are made mostly of water, and within that water lives a rhythm that echoes the tides, just as the ocean rises and falls. So too do our thoughts, our moods, our energy, and our breath. We are not separate from nature. We are part of it, and within that connection is something deeper, something shaped by the gravity of the moon itself. Scientists have long asked whether the moon influences human biology in ways we can measure. Some studies suggest that during the full moon, people take longer to fall asleep or sleep more lightly. Others have recorded subtle shifts in mood, heart rate, or hormone levels, though the results are not always consistent. Still, the pattern is there. Many people say they feel different during certain lunar phases. More alert, more sensitive, more emotional. Perhaps it is not coincidence. Perhaps it is memory. Something ancient in our bodies, remembering how to respond to the moon. The moon's cycle is about 28 days, and that pattern appears not just in tides, but in life itself. The menstrual cycle, the cycle of seed to flower, the timing of sleep, the return of feelings, all of it seems to follow rhythms that resemble the moon. In ancient cultures, this connection was honored and understood. The moon was seen as a guide for intuition, reflection, and healing. Its waxing and waning mirrored the phases of growth, release, and renewal that exist within all living things. Even in the quiet of the modern world, surrounded by clocks and artificial lights, we still feel the effects. The moon does not need to be seen to be felt. Its gravity moves in silence. Its light changes the night. Its presence continues to pull on everything that responds to rhythm, including the water inside our cells and the signals inside our brain. Your heartbeat is a wave. Your breath is a tide. Your thoughts rise and fall like wind over the surface of the sea. When you are sad, it feels like a low tide. When you are inspired, it feels like a high one. And just like the ocean, you change every day, not with force, but with flow. Some days are full, others are quiet. Some bring movement, others bring stillness. The moon teaches us that both are natural. When coral reefs spawn in the sea, they do so together, all at once, guided by the moon. When fish migrate, when birds nest, when tiny sea creatures rise toward the surface in the night, they are often following the lunar rhythm. These patterns are older than maps or machines. They are not taught, they are remembered, and deep inside, we carry them to the moon does. Not just pull water, it creates time, it creates pattern. It gives us a way to return to ourselves. When we feel disconnected, we can look to the sky and see that everything moves in phases. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is stuck. The tide will come back. The full moon will fade. The new moon will grow. And we are never too far from beginning. Again, there is no pressure to be one thing forever. No need to hold the same shape every day. Like the ocean, you are allowed to rise and fall. Like the moon, you are allowed to change your light. Like the tide, you are allowed to return to yourself again and again without judgment. Some people say the moon stirs dreams, that during certain phases the mind opens differently, that emotions surface more easily, that memories become clearer, that inspiration appears like a tide at night. Whether this is science or mystery does not matter. What matters is that we listen, that we notice the gentle shifts, that we give ourselves space to feel what moves inside. Nature does not rush, it does not push, it does not expect perfection. The moon pulls without sound, the ocean answers without resistance. And in the same way, you are allowed to move gently through whatever you feel. You are allowed to follow the quiet rhythm of your own tide. Let the moon be your reminder that change is natural, that stillness is part of movement, that growth includes rest, that returning is not failure, it is part of the cycle. And you are part of that cycle too. You are not broken, you are not behind, you are simply in a phase, just like the moon, just like the tide, just like the sea. And tomorrow, when the light changes and the world continues, the moon will still be watching, the tide will still be turning, and your rhythm will still be your own. Long before people named the planets or measured time in numbers, the moon was already pulling on the sea. That soft force left a mark, not just on the surface of the water, but in its chemistry, its motion, and its memory. The ocean does not forget where it came from, and the moon's guidance can still be seen in the way water moves, gathers, and shapes the world below and above the surface. In ancient tides, when the moon was closer to the earth, the force of gravity stretched the water more deeply and more violently than it does today. These ancient tides swept across the continents before mountains rose and before continents found their places. Some scientists believe that these extreme early tides may have helped life begin by constantly stirring the water near the shore, bringing minerals, heat, and movement to the fragile chemistry of the first organic molecules. The moon's pull was not gentle in those days. It may have slammed waves against rock and pulled oceans into motion that would last for billions of years. Even now, the tides carry minerals from the deep sea to the shore and from the shore back out again. These movements feed entire ecosystems, circulate heat, and deliver nutrients that allow tiny life forms to bloom. The food chains of the ocean begin with plankton, and those plankton depend on tides. The moon may not speak, but it feeds the ocean through motion alone. When a tide comes in, it washes over tidal flats and shallow wetlands, filling pools and channels with new life. When it flows back out, it carries with it the traces of everything it touched. The movement is not just back and forth, it is circular, alive, continuous. Rivers, too, are shaped by tides. Near the mouths of large rivers, like the Amazon or the Nile, the tide pushes against the flow, turning fresh water brackish, changing its direction, even pausing it entirely before letting it move again. These are the places where fresh water and salt water mix and become something new. The organisms that live there are adapted to this constant rhythm. They do not resist the change. They flow with it. Every drop of water carries a story. Some water has been locked in ice for thousands of years. Some has been through clouds and rain and rivers and back to the sea. All of it has been pulled by the moon again and again, lifted and released. The moon does not see the water as separate. It treats the sea as one great body, moving together with one breath. The oceans have patterns hidden within their surface. There are currents that circle entire basins, like the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic or the Kuroshio Current in the Pacific. These massive rivers within the sea are not created by the moon alone, but the tides add to their rhythm. They help guide the pulse of the ocean, help mix warm and cold, shallow and deep. As the earth turns, the tides keep shifting the balance. This movement helps regulate the temperature of the planet, keeps the poles from freezing completely, keeps the tropics from burning to bright. Without the moon, the balance would change. The ocean would grow quieter, but not in a peaceful way. It would lose its breath. The moon also creates what are known as internal tides, invisible to the eye, but just as powerful. These tides move, not across the surface of the sea, but through its layers. Deep within the ocean, gravity from the moon pulls on water masses that have different temperatures and salinities. These movements help mix nutrients across vertical space, bringing what is deep up to the surface and carrying what is old back into the dark. This slow mixing feeds the world. Fish, coral, plankton, all depend on it, and it happens far below the surface, in silence, with no need for light or sound. The moon's fingerprint is in every ocean. It shapes the coastline, the seafloor, the weather above. Storms often follow the tide. Winds shift with it. Clouds form or fade as air pressure responds to the weight of rising or falling water. Even rainfall, in some regions, can follow lunar timing. This does not mean the moon controls the weather, but it contributes to the flow of balance between sea and sky. It reminds us that no part of nature is alone. The ocean breathes with the atmosphere. The earth turns beneath the moon. The moon moves with the earth. Everything listens. Everything responds. The moon also teaches the sea to wait. Between each high tide is a pause. Between each full moon is a phase of darkness. The sea does not rush to rise. It lifts when the moon calls it, and it waits when it must. This patience is written into every shore. A tide pool knows when to fill. A mangrove root knows when to soak. A coastal dune knows when the salt will return. This timing is not taught. It is held in memory. It is passed through water itself. That memory, the amniotic fluid in which we were formed, the blood that flows through our veins, the rhythms of our brain and breath, all carry whispers of the same ocean from which all life once emerged. The moon pulled that ocean then. It pulls us now. The memory is not in our minds, but in our matter. We are not just connected to the sea. We are shaped by its oldest relationship. To remember the moon is to remember that we belong, that we are not visitors on a quiet planet. We are part of its movement, its chemistry, its ancient song. The moon does not need us to observe it, yet it continues to shape our world. The sea does not need us to believe in it, yet it feeds us. Together, they carry a rhythm that asks for nothing but our willingness to be part of it. There is no beginning to this tide, no end, only movement that has lasted for billions of years, only motion that continues, with or without us. And that is the comfort. We do not have to create this rhythm. We only have to feel it. We only have to float with it. We only have to breathe. Along the edges of every continent, there is a place where the land and sea touch one another with careful timing. These are not fixed lines. They are places of constant change. With every tide, the shape of the coast moves slightly. The water stretches a little farther or pulls back a little sooner. Beaches expand and shrink. Cliffs are smoothed. Deltas are fed. And within this motion, entire worlds emerge and vanish and reappear again. This is the home of the intertidal zone, a place that lives half in the water and half in the air. A world shaped by the moon. To most eyes, a tide is a simple thing. The sea rises, the sea falls. But for the creatures that live where the tide touches land, this motion is everything. It determines when to eat, when to move, when to hide, when to rest. Life in these spaces is not measured by sunrise or sunset. It is measured by the return of the water. Some organisms attach themselves to rocks and must endure long hours under the heat of the sun before the tide returns to cool them. Barnacles shut themselves tight against the drying wind. Mussels grip to stone in thick clusters. Sea anemones collapse inward and wait. Others burrow into the sand and wait in silence. When the tide comes back, they open again. They breathe again. They come alive. Crabs scuttle across wet rocks, looking for food. Shorebirds move in wide arcs, hunting for small fish and worms in the sand. The rhythm of the moon determines the timing of every hunt and every escape. It shapes hunger and safety. It creates a schedule as precise as any clock, but made only of water and gravity and instinct. Farther inland, the tide still reaches. Salt marshes and mangroves swell with the incoming sea. Grasses bend as water rises around them. Small fish swim among the roots. These ecosystems depend on the tides not only for water, but for nutrients. With every cycle, the tide brings what is needed and carries away what is no longer useful. It cleanses, it feeds, it refreshes. The moon's pull becomes a silent caretaker of entire habitats. There are places where the tide brings more than just change. It brings transformation. In parts of the world known as tidal flats or mud flats, the sea retreats so far that vast open plains of wet sand are revealed. To walk across one is to walk across the ocean's floor. These flats appear as solid land, but are alive with movement. Worms and shellfish hide just beneath the surface. Birds gather in the thousands to feed on what the tide has uncovered. And then hours later, all of it is gone again beneath the rising sea. This cycle repeats day after day without interruption, and it all follows the moon. The moon's influence can also be seen in the nesting habits of animals. Sea turtles, for example, return to beaches where they were born. They come ashore at night, guided in part by the light of the moon. They dig nests in the sand and lay their eggs. Weeks later, the hatchlings emerge and make their way to the ocean. Some researchers believe that these turtles time their hatching to align with the tide to give the newborns their best chance to reach the water safely. In parts of Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, the moon's phases are still used to guide fishing practices. Local communities pass down knowledge of when certain fish will be most active based on where the moon is in the sky. This is not superstition. It is observation honed over generations. The moon affects the behavior of the sea and everything within it. And people have learned how to read those signs, even on land, away from the water's edge. The moon's rhythm still makes its presence felt. Insects time their calls and their movements. Plants open or close their leaves. Owls and foxes begin their hunt as the moon rises. Wolves have been known to howl not only at the moon but with its rhythm. The night becomes a stage set by the moon's silent light and gravity. The tide may not touch them directly, but the rhythm is still there. The moon does not force, it invites. It does not demand, it guides, and life responds. In the pause between, each tide is room for rest. In the return of each wave is room for renewal. And in that steady repetition there is safety. There is a promise that the sea will return, that the rhythm will hold, that life can shape itself around something that never needs to be perfect, only faithful. Every time you see the moon rising in the sky, you are also seeing the return of a promise made long ago between the earth and its companion. A promise to move without hurry, to return without fail, to change without fear, and to continue without needing to be noticed. That promise is written in the habits of the shoreline, in the way animals move, in the way plants grow, and in the way we feel something we cannot name when we see the moon reflected in a tide pool or glittering across open water. There is wisdom in these cycles, not the kind written in books or measured in numbers, but the kind that lives in breath and tide and wind, the kind that waits in silence and reappears with the moon. There are nights when the moon is hidden, nights when the sky holds no reflection and the sea becomes darker than before. During the new moon, the light vanishes, but the tides remain. Even when we cannot see the moon, its pull continues. Even when the sky is blank, the sea still rises and falls. This invisible presence is one of the moon's most powerful traits. It reminds us that influence does not require visibility, that guidance does not require attention. The moon does not shine in order to be felt. It simply moves, and the world answers. During new moons and full moons, the sun and moon align and their gravity combines. This alignment creates what is known as spring tides. These tides are not tied to the season. The word spring here means to leap or to surge. During these tides, the difference between high tide and low tide becomes greater. The sea stretches more fully. It lifts higher and drops lower. The coastlines feel the movement more intensely, and life adjusts accordingly. There are other times when the sun and moon form a right angle with the earth between them. During these phases, the pull of their gravity partially cancels out. The result is a gentler movement of the tides. These are known as neap tides. The difference between high and low is smaller. The water flows with less intensity. These quiet periods give the shore a moment to rest. They offer time to regrow, to heal, to hold its shape a little longer before shifting again. These cycles of strength and softness repeat every 2 weeks. They create a rhythm deeper than days or weeks, a rhythm that coastal life depends on. Plants time their growth, fish adjust their feeding, crabs and snails choose when to move, not based on clock time, but based on tide time, moon time, gravity time. And we, without realizing it, are shaped by this pattern too. Even in places far from the sea, the moon's cycles affect the world. Groundwater levels shift ever so slightly. Trees adjust the flow of sap in their trunks. The moisture in soil changes with the lunar rhythm. Farmers in many parts of the world plant seeds based on the moon's phase. Some believe crops germinate more quickly if planted during certain moon alignments. Others say the fruit ripens differently. Whether or not the science confirms every detail, the practice persists, because nature is not only about data, it is about relationship, observation, response. Throughout history, the moon's disappearance and reappearance in the sky has held symbolic meaning. When the moon is gone, some traditions say it is resting. Others say it is listening. Some see it as a sign of inward reflection, a time to turn away from noise, to prepare for growth. The new moon is not empty. It is full of potential. Potential. The kind that grows slowly in the dark. Just as seeds root before they sprout, just as clouds gather before the rain, just as silence arrives before understanding, so too does the moon disappear before returning in light, and the sea follows. The tides during the new moon are stronger, the waves stretch farther, the water carries more force. This unseen moon holds just as much gravity as the full one, maybe even more, because it asks us to trust what we cannot see. There is a lesson in the way the sea continues to respond. It does not need proof. It does not need vision. It rises because it knows. It lifts because it remembers. It does not question whether the moon is there. It knows the rhythm will return. And so it waits, and it moves. We often think that change must be visible, that growth must be loud, that progress must be seen. But the moon teaches something else, that much of life moves in silence, that much of healing happens in the dark. That absence does not mean loss, it may mean rest. The moon steps back, only to return again, more fully, and the sea prepares itself for that return with patience and grace. In some coastal traditions, people gather during the new moon to listen rather than speak, to reflect rather than act, to watch the tide come in without needing to explain it. There is wisdom in these pauses. There is space in these silences, and there is power in the unseen motion that continues beneath it all. The moon has no voice, and yet the entire ocean listens. It has no arms, and yet it moves water across the globe. It has no eyes, and yet it sees the earth more fully than we ever could, because it does not need to be everything. It only needs to be what it is, and what it is remains constant, steady, true. So when the moon disappears, and the night feels a little deeper, and the sea moves more quietly than usual, remember that something is still guiding it, that what is missing is not truly gone, that what is dark is still in motion, that silence holds more than absence. It holds preparation, it holds grace, it holds the next beginning. And when the moon returns, and the light begins to grow again, and the tide follows with a greater pull, you will remember what the sea already knows, that presence and absence are both part of rhythm. That darkness is not the opposite of light, but part of its cycle. That tides do not break when the moon is hidden, they continue. They always continue. Not every place on Earth experiences tides in the same way. The moon's pull is constant, but the way the water moves depends on the shape of the land, the depth of the ocean, and the contours of the seafloor. In some places, the difference between high tide and low tide is only a few inches. In others, it can be more than 50 feet. Each coastline has its own rhythm, each ocean basin its own response. The moon sends out the same message to the whole world, but the earth answers in 1,000 different voices. In narrow bays and long inlets, the effect of the moon's gravity can be amplified. The shape of these places funnels the incoming water and pushes it upward like a wave caught in a narrowing channel. The Bay of Fundy in eastern Canada is one of the most extreme examples. Twice a day, the tide there rises and falls more than 50 feet. Whole islands disappear and return. Boats are lifted and lowered by invisible hands. The land breathes in water and exhales again. This dramatic movement shapes the lives of every plant and animal that lives nearby. In contrast, there are parts of the Mediterranean where tides are barely noticeable. The enclosed shape of the sea and the narrow connection to the Atlantic limit the flow of water. The moon still pulls, but the sea does not have the space to respond in the same way. Yet even in these quiet waters, the moon's influence is still felt. In the subtle shift of currents, in the slight sway of anchored ships, in the timing of fish that still remember the old rhythm. Some places experience mixed tides. High tide might come once a day or twice. Some days, the difference between the two highs is large. Other times, it is small. These patterns are shaped by how the moon's position interacts with the sun's gravity and the tilt of the earth. The result is a world where no two coastlines are exactly alike, where the same moon creates 1,000 different patterns, where harmony and variation live together. In the far north and south, near the polar regions, the tides help guide the movement of sea ice. They pull and push the frozen surface. They crack it and spread it. They open breathing holes for seals and carry nutrients beneath the ice where plankton begin the base of the food web. Even in places where the sea is frozen for much of the year, the moon's pull continues to work quietly, constantly, in ways that are not always seen, but are always shaping life. On tropical islands, where coral reefs grow close to shore, the tides feed the lagoons and shape the way young fish grow. During high tide, the reef is covered. Larger fish can enter. The water is deeper and cooler. When the tide recedes, the reef is exposed. Pools form in the coral. Small creatures hide there. Birds gather above. Crabs move quickly between puddles. The reef listens to the tide as if it were a heartbeat, and its life moves in step with that rhythm. The people who live on these coasts have built their lives around the moon's movement. In parts of Indonesia and the Philippines, children are taught to read the tide by looking at the position of the moon. In parts of Africa, communities gather shellfish only when the water is low enough to reveal the flats. In the Arctic, the timing of whale hunts and seal migrations still follows the pulse of the ocean. All of this is ancient knowledge passed through generations. It does not need to be written. It is lived. It is known. It is felt in the bones. Harbors and cities built along tidal rivers have learned to plan their movements with the tides. Ships enter port only when the water is deep enough to carry them safely. Bridges are built with room for water to rise and fall. Drainage systems are designed to let the sea come and go without harm. The moon is not just a symbol or a myth. It is part of architecture, part of engineering, part of every decision made where land meets sea. Even underwater, the moon has sculpted landscapes. Tidal forces over time can erode rock and shape channels. They can build sandbars and alter the flow of deep-sea currents. The bottom of the ocean is not still. It shifts like the surface. It remembers the moon's pull in every ripple of sand and every carved canyon that has formed over millions of years. The moon does not play favorites. It pulls on every ocean equally. But how the Earth responds is shaped by countless local details. In this way, the moon creates both unity and diversity. One force, many responses, one cycle, infinite expressions. Just as each human hears the same music but dances in their own way, each stretch of coastline follows the same moon but creates its own tide. This is why tides matter. Not because they are uniform, but because they are alive. They are not copies, they are conversations. Between water and rock, between gravity and motion, between time and memory, the moon offers the rhythm. The Earth chooses how to move to it, and through it all, the message remains the same. That change is constant, that flow is natural, that return is promised, and that every part of the world has its own way of listening to the same silent song. Long before the moon was studied through telescopes or mapped by machines, it was a presence in the night sky that stirred something in the human heart. Long before people knew the science of tides or the math of gravity, they still saw the ocean move, and they saw the moon above it, and they felt the connection between them. This feeling led to stories, to rituals, to belief. The moon became a symbol not only of nature, but of something greater, something that lived beyond the reach of words, but still moved within the world. In early civilizations, the moon was often seen as a goddess. She rose above the sea, with a calm face and gentle light. She appeared and disappeared in cycles that matched the rhythms of life on Earth. The moon's changes were seen as a mirror of time and emotion. In Sumerian myth, the moon was Nana. In Greek tradition, she was Selene. In Egypt, she became Thoth. In Japan, Tsukuyomi. In each culture, the moon was seen as more than a rock in the sky. She was a being with mood and purpose and power. These myths were not based on ignorance, they were based on observation. People noticed that when the moon was full, the tides were stronger. That when the moon was new, the nights were darker. That plants grew differently. That sleep changed. That certain animals came out at night only under moonlight. These patterns became the foundation for calendars, for harvest rituals, for songs sung in the dark. The moon became the keeper of stories and secrets, and the tide was her voice. Even now, in the modern world, with all its machines and maps, the moon has not lost her place. She still appears each night above the rooftops and oceans. She still pulls the sea toward her, still shapes the rhythm of the coast, still glows in silence. Children still watch her from windows. Writers still find inspiration in her light. Poets still call her name. And travelers on long roads still feel comfort when she rises to follow them through the night. The moon has also become part of science. We have learned how her gravity pulls the Earth, how she shapes the tides, how she stabilizes the planet's tilt, how her presence allows the seasons to be steady. Without the moon, the Earth would wobble more. The climate would shift more violently. The ocean's tides would weaken. Life would be harder. She does not only reflect light, she reflects balance. She reflects order. She reflects the deep, invisible forces that hold the Earth in harmony. And even with all we have learned, the moon remains mysterious. We have walked on her surface, planted flags in her dust, sent machines to orbit her. But the feeling she creates has not changed. she still evokes awe, still stirs questions that go beyond data, still makes us look up with a sense of wonder. Because she is not only a body in the sky, she is a presence, a rhythm, a mirror. She reminds us that we live in a world that is shaped not just by machines or rules, but by feeling, that science and myth can walk together, that the same moon who pulls the sea also pulls something within the human spirit, a longing, a quiet recognition, a return. The tide reminds us that everything that comes also goes, that every high is followed by a low, that nothing stays, but nothing truly disappears. The moon teaches us the value of change, of patience, of repetition. She teaches us that silence can be powerful, that presence does not have to be loud, that the most faithful forces in life are often the ones we forget to notice. There are still people today who live by lunar calendars, who celebrate new moons and full moons as moments of meaning, who light candles or say prayers or simply sit in quiet reflection. These traditions are not outdated. They are timeless because they are rooted in observation, in rhythm, in something that never stopped mattering. When we pay attention to the moon, we remember that we are part of something larger, that the sea does not rise and fall for no reason, that our emotions and thoughts might also follow tides we cannot always explain, that being human means living within a pattern we did not create but have always been shaped by dot. To feel the pull of the moon is to feel what every wave has felt. To listen to the sea is to hear what every coastline has heard. To watch the tide is to remember what life is made of: change, return, flow. The moon pulls at the ocean on Earth and shapes its tides with steady grace, but the idea of tides is not limited to our planet. In the vastness of space, the same laws of gravity apply, and the same forces that move water here move entire worlds out there. Tides are everywhere in the universe, and their reach goes far beyond our shorelines. One of the most extreme examples of tidal power can be found on Jupiter's moon, Io. Io is the most volcanically active body in the solar system. Its surface is covered in lava lakes and erupting volcanoes, and all of this is caused not by internal heat alone, but by tidal forces. Io is caught in a gravitational dance between Jupiter and two other nearby moons. As it orbits, the gravitational pull of Jupiter stretches and compresses Io again and again. This constant tidal flexing heats its interior and drives the eruptions. There is no water on Io, but there are still tides. The tides shape rock instead of sea. They remind us that gravity moves more than just water. It moves worlds. Another moon, this one orbiting Saturn, is called Enceladus. It is a small, icy body, but beneath its frozen surface lies an ocean of liquid water. Scientists believe that tidal forces created by Saturn's pull keep that ocean warm. Cracks in the ice at the south pole of Enceladus release plumes of water, vapor and ice into space. These geysers are evidence of a hidden sea kept alive by the moon's constant motion around its planet. Tidal energy is the source of that warmth. Without it, the ocean would freeze. Life might not exist. But with it, there is the possibility of movement and even the ingredients for life. The same might be true for Europa, another of Jupiter's moons. Europa also hides a deep ocean beneath an icy crust. Tidal forces stretch and knead it as it orbits. These movements could create hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, just like the ones on Earth where life began. No sunlight reaches that place, but the moon's orbit provides the energy. Even in darkness, tides may give birth to life. Tides do not always involve oceans. On stars and planets, gravity can stretch entire bodies. In binary star systems, where two stars orbit one another, their shapes are often distorted. One star may pull at the other, creating long, extended forms. These tidal interactions change orbits, create heat, and sometimes pull material from one star into the other. In extreme cases, tidal forces can tear apart comets and asteroids if they pass too close to a massive planet. This boundary is known as the Roche limit. Inside that limit, gravity stretches an object beyond what it can withstand, and it breaks apart into pieces. The rings of Saturn may have formed this way, from a moon that wandered too close and was torn apart by tidal force. Even the Earth itself is stretched slightly by the moon's pull. Not just the water, but the land beneath us rises and falls by tiny amounts each day. The ground shifts in slow motion. The crust breathes without us feeling it. We stand on a planet that is always in motion, shaped by forces too vast to see, but never absent. This idea that tides are universal is a reminder that the moon is not alone in its influence. It is a small part of a larger story, a story written in gravity and time, a story shared by planets and stars and moons and ice and rock. Everywhere that gravity moves, there is the potential for tides. And everywhere there are tides, there is change. There is motion. There is the possibility for life. When we look up at the moon and think of the sea, we are also looking into a mirror held by the universe. We are seeing a law that applies everywhere, a rhythm that repeats beyond our world, a connection between what is here and what is far away. And in that connection is comfort, because it means that Earth is not alone in being shaped by rhythm, that the tide is not only local, it is cosmic, it is ancient, it is shared. The same pull that moves the ocean stirs the crust of distant moons. The same gravity that shapes our coastlines shapes entire planets. The same invisible hand that lifts the tide carries asteroids across space. This is the scale of the moon's story. A story that begins at the edge of the sea but continues into the stars. And in that knowledge, there is peace. Because it means the forces that guide the tide are not random. They are constant. They are trusted. They are written into the fabric of the universe. The sea does not rise by chance. It rises in harmony with something larger, something older, something that moves through all things. The moon moves the sea, and the sea moves the world, and in the space between those movements, something gentle unfolds. A rhythm forms, a pattern is held. Tide is not only about water rising and falling. It is about what returns, what renews, what carries on without needing to be seen. From the first ripples of Earth's ancient oceans to the quiet surf of distant coasts today, the tide has marked the passing of time in a way no clock ever could. It arrives without asking. It departs without delay. It leaves a mark and then washes it clean. And again it comes back. This returning is not a repetition. It is a kind of trust, a kind of promise between the moon and the earth that motion will continue even in stillness, that change will come gently, that nothing stays the same and nothing is ever truly lost. Every coastline remembers the tide. Each grain of sand was once shaped by waves. Each cliff face once tasted the sea. Each bay was drawn in waterlines, pulled by the gravity of a moon that never stopped circling above. And in those lines is written the history of the world, not in years, but in returns, in breaths, in the soft movements of water. The moon never touches the earth, yet it holds the sea. It never speaks, yet its silence commands motion, changes its course, yet it allows for change. It teaches us that influence can be quiet, that guidance can be soft, that the most powerful forces in life are often the ones we cannot see. And through that soft pull, we remember something about ourselves. Inside the body, there are tides too, the rise and fall of breath, the push and pull of thought, not mistakes. They are part of being alive. We are not meant to be still. We are meant to move with the rhythm of things, to expand and contract, to gather and release, to feel and to let go, just as the sea accepts the moon's pull without resistance. We can accept our own movements without judgment. We can learn to ride the tides within us, to listen for the rhythm beneath our thoughts, to trust the flow even when we do not understand it. We are not separate from the ocean. We are not strangers to the moon. We are made of the same material. We are shaped by the same laws. We are part of the same story. When we watch the tide, we see a lesson written in motion, that returning is not failure, that pulling away is sometimes part of coming closer. The sea does not doubt the moon, it simply follows, and in that following it finds its form, its breath, its life. So too can we follow, not blindly, but gently, not with force, with the quiet understanding that every inward turn is followed by outward flow, that every low will lift again, that every night carries light, even if we cannot yet see it. The moon will keep pulling, the sea will keep listening, and the earth will keep turning in that sacred rhythm. We do not need to change it. We only need to rest within it, to breathe with it, to let it guide us back to stillness. There is nothing more to reach for, nothing to prove, nothing to fix. You are already part of the rhythm. You are already shaped by the tide. You are already being carried home. And just as the tide always returns to the shore, sleep will return to you, not because you force it, but because you followed the rhythm, because you listened, because you let go. The moon is still. There, the sea is still breathing, and so are you.